Good evening, and welcome to another Pure Theory Crafting for Marvel Avengers Alliance 2. Today's been something of an infiltrator day. I have written out 2 posts, start to finish, so about as soon as I finish recording this video, I will be hopping in and recording the next. This video is for Daredevil. And while he was a specific request, he normally fits the kind of hero that I avoided doing these videos for, at least from the start, because he is part of the current PvP meta. He is a very strong PvP hero who can front load a very immense amount of damage. And for that reason, there's usually some very good resources for him. That said, Daredevil is a decently complex character with a very wide array of moves, and perhaps the most fun I had with him was finding that there was no reason to make a specific build. He can swap abilities almost at will and make them work together. He is a very, very well-rounded character in terms of his abilities. We'll take a look at 2 big mentalities or playstyles to aim at with him, as opposed to maybe calling them actual builds. And you'll be able to take either the 3rd slot or even 2 slots and swap them around as needed. Now, Daredevil is a hero who I am at least passingly familiar with. I used him for a little while. I do have him here. He is at 3-star. He's actually completed many of his tasks to reach 4-star. I really just need to finish him out. And the big thing is he needs another 3,000 or so AP to do so. He's not part of my current PvP team. I really should finish him out to 4-star and make him part of that current PvP team, because he fits well alongside several melee teams. Let's go ahead and hop over to profile. I need to stop clicking on the wrong things. Take a look at his stats. Accuracy and evasion are both very high and balanced. Now, neither one is 2,000. 2,000 is that benchmark on a level 33-star character that lets me know that they've dumped a lot of their stats into just one, and so I expect other stats to be significantly weaker. He doesn't necessarily do that. His health is pretty low, his defense not very high, and his attack actually stays somewhat low base. He makes up for that through his accuracy, as we'll see. His speed does start pretty high. And his speed and his accuracy, these 3 stats right here, these are the only things that we'll see crystal slots for. He really needs to watch these 3, and quite frankly, between health, attack, and defense, for a truly offensive infiltrator, attack is going to be what we try to build back up. His perception bonus works pretty well for PvP right now. It increases your team's evasion, and it increases your team's accuracy. With those 2 stats being something of, the end-all be-all for PvP, having the 2 of them together on a leader's bonus that the rest of your team can use means that many of the times that I see him in PvP, I see him as the leader. Daredevil is one of those infiltrators alongside Marvel Now Black Widow who gains his stealthy status from a passive instead of from a specific move. None of his moves put him into stealth. Instead, all of them will because of this. So none of them have stealthy listed, but if he doesn't have the revealed status on him, then he will enter stealth the next time he takes any action at all. And we'll kind of have to take note of that with some of his abilities. He also gains focused. Daredevil is an accuracy-heavy character. He has more than one move that really depends on critical hits. And he has more than one way to actually boost his own accuracy. This is part of it. Every move that Daredevil does will give him focused. He will have it up more or less 100% as soon as he takes his first turn all the way through the end of the battle. You never have to worry about focused with him. He's going to be consistently benefiting from it. He is a stamina user, looking at his resources. Stamina, not terribly complex. Again, because every video is meant to be standalone. Stamina is probably the most common resource. It does start at full. It starts at 100. And it regenerates 40 per turn. Some of Daredevil's moves cost a lot. 70, even 80 in one case. Those numbers are kind of important. You can use a 70 stamina move twice consecutively, then you're out. You can use an 80 stamina move just once, because you won't regenerate enough stamina to use it twice in a row. So you kind of have to be picky with that one. He has a lot of abilities whose cost drops to 25. Once down there, once it's at that low level, he can use that ability indefinitely, effectively recovering 15 stamina per turn. If at any point you need to recharge for one of those big abilities, he does have to resort to his tactical. Because he does not have a secondary resource like combo points or retaliation points or Black Widow or the Age of Ultron Black Widow's insight, because he has nothing that he pairs with stamina, he never takes any turn where he's not initially spending stamina. All of his actions require it. He doesn't have any free buffs, for instance. He does have at least one move with finesse, which gives him the potential, based on his accuracy, which is pretty high, to not spend stamina for that turn. And that's kind of a mainstay ability for him. People really, really rely on that move to keep his overall stamina higher. Because unlike other characters, he doesn't necessarily build into a simple chain where by the end of it he's back at 100. He does need to watch his stamina consumption. And we're going to go ahead and take a look at those abilities right here, right now. The first ability, MANRIKI GUSARI, Range Blunt. This, I have it at 2-star. I don't know that it started at 50 stamina, but I think it did. I'm pretty sure the second star added 30%. Many of his debuffs and many of his buffs are going to have that 80% there. I'll say it again as we get over to the ISO Crystal page, and Experimental is a good set for him. If you're going to use any of his abilities that have debuffs, then Experimental is a good set. And this one is strong because it buffs both categories he tends to use. He's got, this is a range blunt, so he's not all melee. But he is pretty much all blunt and all unarmed. It's one of the two on every attack. Sometimes it's both. And this boosts both of them. A funny note here. His Clobbered, medium duration. I have no idea why this one is medium duration and this one is very long. I could swear that Clobbered is normally very long on other heroes. I'm assuming that's probably a bug. I could be wrong. Either way, it does allow him to work along. This acts as a setup move for both blunt and for unarmed teams, as well as for himself, who can make use of both of these. The big thing here, at 3-star, it drops to that 25 stamina. Now, even at 4-star, while it becomes a fast move, its damage is way below that little rubric I use, where I say that 120 is what I want to see on a fast move before I consider it a true damage dealing move instead of a setup. He doesn't reach that point with this. This is a setup move. It's meant to be used when you are, after you've used one of your big high stamina bursts, to slowly build your stamina back up while you're debuffing the enemy line. If you find that you don't need these particular debuffs and you want to recharge for those bigger hits again, you might actually be better off using his tactical to gain 40 stamina instead of using this to gain just 15 for the turn, if you don't need to apply these debuffs again. Otherwise, both of these are actually very good, very solid debuffs because they affect his entire line of abilities. Billy Club Beatdown. This move needs attention. I need to focus your guys' attention on it. For one, it's actually required for one of his tasks. Maybe even two of them. I can't remember off the top of my head. It's been a little while since I've used him. The core part here is that finesse. Now, its 4-star upgrade from where I've got it is just a damage upgrade. But let's not call it just a damage upgrade. This move has no cooldown. Because it's a 2-hit combination. It's not just a single shot. He hits twice. If either one of those is a critical hit, you get back the full 70 stamina. That was actually fixed in the last major patch, the 1.1 patch, because prior to that, it wasn't doing it. But whether it had that or not, people were still taking this move because I say in my little easy rubric that a normal speed move should have approximately 160 damage or more before I consider it a damage dealing move. This is double that. Plus exploit weakness. This move lets you work your way through the enemy line very fast. It's going to rip large chunks of health off of whoever he targets with it. One of the ways in which Daredevil stays on top in damage dealing, because he's one of the best infiltrators in the game right now in terms of just kind of like general response, when enough people are saying, hey, he's up there, and you can actually see it when playing him, there's a reason he's considered one of the top infiltrators. It's because his moves have such a high listed damage. Yes, his attack stat's a little lower, but he makes up for that and more just due to the raw damage of the ability. Exploit weakness on this one. This is blunt. Crushed is a physical debuff. Clobbered is tactical. So if you're using this ability alongside a melee team, or sorry, an unarmed team, especially alongside like a tank like Luke Cage, they're throwing around Clobbered like it's going out of style. This move doesn't benefit from it in any way. It doesn't even benefit from the type of debuff. But Daredevil is more than capable of applying physical debuffs himself, and the raw damage of this move means that if you can't get this, you're still going to deal very solid amounts of damage. But the big thing here is that finesse, and having 2 chances to land a critical hit with his high accuracy means 9 times out of 10 it's going to do it. Especially as you star him up to say 3 and 4 star, most current content, he won't slow down for that. Flying Blind. This one I didn't level up because at the time that I was using him, I actually had someone who could apply stun. And that is the primary purpose of this ability. It's melee unarmed, its speed is slow. The speed itself doesn't go up any faster. You have to rely on it being unarmed and clobbered if you want it to be faster than slow. And the overall damage is only barely scraping past what I consider decent damage for a fast move. The stamina doesn't drop below 50, so you do have to actually spend stamina on the turn in order to use this. He does take advantage of weaken because it is a physical debuff. But again, the primary purpose here is so you can have a stun. And stuns are powerful enough to not necessarily make this a worthless ability. It's not. It's a stun move, and that's what it should be used for. Because of the way stun does its pushback, you probably want clobbered on the enemy to make this faster. Otherwise, there's a decent chance that Daredevil's going to get his turn right before the stunned enemy is, and it kind of takes them both out of the combat, which is not the goal. Especially not a high damage character like Daredevil. You want him to take more turns because he hits really hard. Snap Kicks. This is, like MANRIKI GUSARI, this is a setup move. This one is, ironically, even more general than MANRIKI GUSARI is. That one had the ability to set up both blunt and unarmed teams. This one kinda sets up just about everybody. And it does it through wide open. Now it does have a 100% chance for foiled, which does completely strip off tactical buffs, and that's nice. The 80% chance for wide open, that's where that experimental set would come in. Increasing damage and accuracy is very big for Daredevil because he has so many abilities that depend on that accuracy boost. Yeah, it's tactical, not physical. 40% accuracy is still nothing to sneer at when you're looking at Daredevil. The fact that it moves to 25 stamina at 3 star and moves to fast at 4 star allows him to kind of slip this in when needed in order to accelerate his stamina recovery when using something like Billy Club Beatdown. This move is not really meant to be spammed for damage. Its damage is pretty low. Clobber will bring it up some, but you know what? Clobber brings up every unarmed some. So I still consider this a relatively low damage move, primarily meant for that 25 stamina and the accuracy boosting wide open. It is actually a good third slot filler move. But for me, this was slightly better. This one is an expensive move to invest in, but it's not a bad one to have. It is melee blunt, so it plays to his blunt base skills if you want to pair him alongside blunt heroes. Again, like kind of like Thor. Rampaging. It's kind of hard to overstate just how much rampaging helps a character who does these massive damage bursts anyway. Daredevil with rampaging is capable of very, very large numbers. Consistent, very large numbers. Exposed is almost icing on the cake. In fact, if anything, it's really here because of the physical debuff, which allows you to use this move to set up moves with exploit weakness. The application chance does go up by 30% at 3-star, and I actually have used this because I was using Daredevil around the time that I first hit 30. So he was an early 3-star for me. I was using this in the build that I was running, even though it was only a 50% chance to apply these. I would still sneak it in every now and then just to see if I could get this up. 3-star will increase that to 80% for both, but you'll need the experimental set to take it any higher than that. 4-star upgrade, 25 stamina, 125. This never quite gets too fast. So in terms of damage dealing, again, it's a little bit subpar. It's those big stamina spenders that have the really high numbers, and moves like this are meant to kind of buff those up and bring back his stamina. And that's kind of a trend for Daredevil, that his 25 stamina moves are a little bit subpar in terms of damage in general, but often have some way to really increase those big bursts that he does. And it's part of the reason why Billy Club Beatdown is such a popular move, is it lets him use these only infrequently because he's keeping his stamina up through finesse. And we'll see that as we get over to the build section. This is another very popular move. Deception Strike hurts. And the only reason that this is not truly a spammable move is that one turn cooldown that does not go away. It is melee unarmed, it is slow, but it has critical path. This is a jumping kick. He kind of flips forward, plants his feet in the opponent's face, and then jumps back, which means you only have one shot to land the crit. Unlike Billy Club Beatdown, which can give you back your stamina if either hit crits, you've only got one shot for this. But it's a stealthy maneuver. This is a fun way to kind of open up combat. It does do a very solid amount of damage. Again, its final damage is up in 230. Well, that's not terribly high for slow. That's stamina cost. It actually drops below 40, even though it's a critical path move that grants him another turn. Were it not for the one turn cooldown, you could potentially spam this over and over and over again. The fun part is you never can't use it. Because of that 25 stamina at 4-star, if you take it all the way to that point, every time it's off cooldown, it's available. Because you will always regenerate 40 stamina at the start of your turn, and thereby, no matter how low you've taken your stamina, you can afford this move. Even at 50 stamina, it's very, very rare that you run out completely and can't afford Deception Strike. Unless you ended the last turn at 0, you'll be able to use this again. And it should be looked at for that. It's meant to increase his speed. The damage is pretty solid. You're offsetting the slow speed with critical path. This will be treated as an instant speed if he lands a critical hit, thereby allowing the speed of the second move that you use to be the defining speed for the turn. And if you follow this with a fast move or with a normal speed move, that's going to be what actually determines how fast you'll get your next turn again. And that next move you use after this will erase the cooldown. This can be a fun trick to, and we'll actually see this as we get to the builds, to launch this, launch a cheap or a stamina recovering move, come back and do this one again. It once he's built up and once his accuracy is back up there, well above par, and he's consistently landing critical hits and devastates, this gives him the ability to effectively take 2 actions every turn. Ruthless Justice. This one is here mostly for the debuffs. It is a slow move. The damage rating is for slow, and it's blunt, so you're not going to get it any faster due to clobbered. It's always going to be 50 stamina, but again, it's really just there for the debuffs, kind of like his stun move, his snap kick, or not snap kick, his jump kicking. Necrosis and Traumatizing. It's going to remove and prevent healing, and then if somebody's below 20, it's going to do a burst of damage, kind of like Volatile. Typically, that's enough to kill them. It's designed to be that fatal strike. That's a fairly solid amount of damage. 189 is an acceptably solid amount of damage. Enough that it's not unlikely that it will trigger Traumatizing. The fact that it has Necrosis means that someone who has Tenacity or the Benevolent EISO set, which I think simply grants Tenacity, this gets around that. Necrosis removes Tenacity and allows you to kill them with Traumatizing. This is a finishing move. As soon as somebody is weak enough, you launch this at them because it doesn't matter what their survival tool is, it's going to kill them. But again, it's a little bit situational. Bring it if you need it. A little bit situational. Haste 3-star move, Last Rites. This is a powerful, powerful hit. It is at 366 with 2 separate ways to double it to increase its damage. Fired from stealth against anybody with a physical debuff. Go ahead and treat this as if that damage was double, which puts this along the lines of 700 points of damage. Now, it pays for that with that 80 stamina. You cannot use this move all the time. You've got to have some way to build your stamina back up. In fact, if you bring this and Billy Club Beatdown, and you fire this off from a full bar of 100, you actually will not make it all the way back to the 70 stamina required to use the Billy Club Beatdown to get your stamina back with Finesse. It takes at least 2 turns to recover enough stamina to use this again. 2 actions at least. But this move is blunt and unarmed. Yeah, it's slow, but MANRIKI GUSARI actually sets up both halves of this move into an extremely powerful, kind of just over-the-top damage-dealing burst. I've seen this move used very often in PvP. There is also a build that lets you chain this roughly the equivalent of every other turn for someone else. It's every 3 turns for Daredevil. But this is a very, very solid multi-hit big burst of overall damage. And if your team is capable of applying Crushed or Clobbered for him and he doesn't have to rely on MANRIKI GUSARI, there are ways to kind of weave this in with regularity and allow him to do more than his fast burst of damage, to actually do very lethal bursts of damage at that speed as well. It's one of my favorite overall builds for him, but requires a little bit of team setup in order to benefit from the exploit weakness on this. And since stealth, because he naturally enters stealth whenever revealed is gone, then stealthy maneuver is, you need to have this available at that point, and it's somewhat hard to time. It's not quite the same thing as some of the other infiltrators who enter stealth manually, where once revealed is off, you can kind of hold off for a turn or so to make sure that stealth lines up with your stealthy maneuver. Doesn't quite work the same way for Daredevil. His tactical, Men Without Fear, because he's Daredevil and they've got to work that in there somewhere. Very fast. He has no secondary resource, so it gives him nothing else. It does apply Demoralize to an enemy, which is a really good debuff. It is. And it gives him Clarified, so it removes all mental debuffs from himself and then prevents them for a little while. The big purpose here is that if you want to recharge for those heavy hits and you've burned down your stamina more than you've expected, if you had a bad string of hits with Billy Club Beatdown and you didn't actually get your stamina back with Finesse like you were hoping, this is a way to get more stamina for the turn than his other moves are. The ones that cost 20, he has nothing that's free. So the ones that cost 25 effectively give him back 15 for the turn. This move will give him the full 40, and it's his only way to do that. It's very fast, and he is fast, meaning that once you use this, you'll get your other turn pretty quick. His Innate. This is a very powerful Innate, and it's, in some ways, it's the reason, it's what initially propelled him up towards the top of the PvP lists for heroes. Radar Sense allows him to bypass Stealthy and Protect by default, and if that wasn't enough, because that saves 2 separate ISO sets, he gains 25% accuracy against Stealthy and Protected targets. Not the person doing the protection, but against those who he's trying to cover. Daredevil preys on weakness. He is fantastic at hunting enemy infiltrators, anyone with a veiled set, anyone hiding behind a tank. If the enemy is not physically that tough, or even more so if they're not that evasive, Daredevil will rip them apart in a very short period of time, and there's nothing they can do that would necessarily stop him from it. The only thing that I can think of that can actually stop Daredevil from targeting you is the ambushing status, and thereby taking yourself completely out of the battlefield. This is one of the more powerful Innates I've seen, and it's the reason why, while its use in PvE is a little bit limited because Stealth and Protect doesn't happen all the time, in PvP, this is amazing. Going over to those pages where we're looking at slots, this is, I mean, let's be honest here, this is almost monochromatic. Only 3 of his stats are actually represented on this. 3 white speed slots, 3 yellow accuracy slots, and 2 purple evasion slots. His evasion starts really high anyway, so his evasion is solid. It's good, which is good because his defense and his health are not very good. So this is his method of survival. Because he is so strong in PvP, we have to consider that survival. He does not take hits very well. He doesn't get defensive buffs. He doesn't have a way to, other than the ability to remove a mental debuff from himself, he has nothing that truly assists his own survivability aside from maybe being in stealth. So this, strong way to build that back up. We've already gone, I'm talking into the ground how much accuracy helps him. Having 3 slots for that just brings it higher. Depending on the movesets you want to use for him, even though he has 3 accuracy slots, accuracy should be your secondary stat of choice on these 5 as well. Now, his speed starts pretty high, and he gets 3 speed slots. Normally, speed is one of those that I like to call a good secondary stat. I think of that as a tertiary stat for him. Instead, if you aren't building his accuracy, or if you're using or if you're not using his finesse or critical path abilities, attack should be your secondary stat of choice. It's not represented on here at all, and Daredevil is a fantastic burst damage dealer. Everything you can add to his attack just makes that better. So attack should be your second on the 3 yellow slots, if you can find it. Accuracy should probably be your second on all 5 of these if you can get it, and then attack after that. Most of us try to run 3-star crystals or higher. If you've got a 3-star crystal, try to get it to be attack and accuracy for these, and then kind of work on the rest of them from there. I would not spend a whole lot of time boosting his, maybe his health, but not really his defense. Boost his evasion. It's pretty high to start with, and he's going to get more out of it than trying to bring up a low defense through secondary stats. Set bonuses. He is a damage dealing character who's best off running with a tank in PvE. Coordinated, not a bad set for him. One of the big problems with coordinated and stealth using characters is that the free attacks from coordinated have a tendency to break stealth. But in the case of Daredevil and Marvel Now Black Widow, who enter stealth with their passive, you actually have about a 50-50 shot of not just breaking stealth with coordinated, but actually entering stealth with coordinated and being in stealth at the start of your turn. So that really balances out to me. His free attack is melee blunt. So for unarmed, or most free attack teams are unarmed teams, he's not going to benefit from clobber the way others do. And he doesn't really rely on free attacks the way other characters do. In fact, the only way to get them with him is to have somebody else give him buffs or give him coordinated. His high accuracy means he's going to do solid damage. Even if you haven't been building up his attack, his free attack is going to do acceptably solid damage. So it's not wasted the way that it might be on like low attack characters or utility characters. If you're going to take him into PvP, I would skip coordinated. And I would do so because if you're going to run him with Veiled, and that's one that I very highly suggest for Daredevil, I'll get to that in a second here. Coordinated pulling him out of stealth opens him up to the enemy team. And for a low defense character who's all about the offense, Daredevil, if it weren't for his evasion, would very solidly be a glass cannon. He's still kind of a glass cannon. High accuracy characters will hit him. High accuracy scrappers will tear through him. And the goal with Daredevil is to get as much damage out there as possible very quickly. He's capable of immense amounts of burst right off the bat, but that doesn't necessarily save him from an opening barrage. So if you're going to take him into PvP, this is a character where I would skip coordinated in favor of defensive sets. And first and foremost is Veiled, because Veiled is not purely defensive for him. He does have stealthy maneuvers, and he has the ability to fire those stealthy maneuvers off without any kind of setup. Which means that, like characters like Black Panther, starting Veiled allows him to start with some of his most powerful moves primed and ready. When looking at characters like, I don't want to say Gamora because she's not that dependent on stealth, but when looking at some of the other infiltrators, the next character I have kind of does that too. Combo point characters who start stealthed have to use a combo builder and will break that opening stealth and thus can't use it for their big heavy hits. Daredevil doesn't have that restriction. Veiled starts him off with two of his more useful abilities already locked and loaded. So Veiled is a favorite set for me. If you're using his moves that have debuffs, and not all of them actually do, but if you're using any of them, then Experimental is good because he tends to cap at 80%. His two big damage-dealing offensive moves, actually his three big damage-dealing offensive moves, don't use it because they don't apply the debuffs themselves. Two of them will exploit them, so having a team that can apply physical debuffs works well for him. But if you're using any of those setup moves or those two utility moves that cost 50 stamina, Experimental is pretty good because he will never truly reach 100% except for maybe two debuffs out of the entire list, and one of them is stun. For defensive sets, Impenetrable rocks in PvP. Otherwise, I'm leery about that with low health characters. It doesn't give them a huge benefit compared to some of the other sets. But in PvP, it is an amazing thing to kind of hold off some of those massive opening shots that you tend to suffer from. So Impenetrable is not bad for him. And Barricading is even better. He has no way to apply a shield to himself, so he won't accidentally overwrite it like other characters will. And Barricading significantly increases his effective overall health. So if you're running one of his setup moves, I would suggest Veiled, Experimental, Impenetrable, and Barricading. If you're not, and you're just running his damage moves because the rest of your team can handle the debuffs for him, then I would swap out Experimental for maybe Rejuvenating, some kind of set like that of your choice, just a two-piece set. Don't worry about the Alert set. Don't worry about the Unstoppable set. He's going to bypass Stealth and Protection naturally, so he doesn't need those sets. They are utterly wasted on him. Something to keep in mind, and something that does that, again, that Innate is very strong because it replaces not one, but two complete sets here, and allows him to pick his target whenever he wants to. For builds, I don't view Daredevil as having a locked-in build. His stamina goes up, it goes down, it goes up, it goes down, and it tends to do so in some very kind of strange bursts. So it comes down to a playstyle mentality of large bursts of damage versus really, really fast attacks. And part of it comes down to what buffs your team provides for him more than anything else. So a high speed Daredevil is going to use a move combination like this. And the key here is Deception Strike on cooldown. You start this off as many times as you possibly can. Once you get to 4-star, you can use this indefinitely. You can always use it on cooldown, with Billy Club Beatdown being your follow-up to get back your stamina for the turn, so that you're never below 100 stamina, because you're able to use the finesse from this. When I was running Daredevil, and this is a holdover from that point, I used Baton Rouge as, and yes, I realize it's a play on Baton Rouge, but still, it's still Baton for him. I used it to apply Rampaging because at the time I was not running another hero who could. Now that I'm running Age of Ultron Black Widow all the time, Rampaging is everywhere for me. She's applying it every turn that I need to throw back up there. So this move would be a wasted filler, and I should replace it with something else. If your team is throwing up physical debuffs for you, if they're applying Crushed, if they're applying Weakened, if they're applying Exposed, any of these, then you can actually swap out your setup moves entirely and bring Last Rites in there. Now, Last Rites is much slower than these, but a 4-star Deception Strike costs you no stamina. And you can do this chain here. Use Deception Strike. If it triggers Stealth, use Last Rites because you're at 100 stamina again, and you can throw that move. If Deception Strike does not trigger Stealth, because you have the revealed status, go ahead and use Billy Club Beatdown to bring your stamina back up using Finesse. If this is costing you 25, and therefore you're gaining 15 overall, you drop to 20 using Last Rites, you recover up to 60. When Deception Strike is fired, you will recover from 60 to 75 and just barely be able to afford Billy Club Beatdown. But all it takes is one crit out of the two, and he gets his stamina back. This is potentially his most... those three in tandem are his most offensive moves, because none of them actually apply buffs or debuffs. Meaning you are somewhat dependent on your team to bring those for you. But you end up with 2 stealthy maneuvers and 2 exploit weakness, 1 with finesse, 1 with critical path, and it makes Daredevil the prime damage dealing machine for your team, allowing him to throw out 2 solid damage actions consistently at a fairly high rate of speed. But he needs those debuffs to make the most of it, so you need to have a team who can support him on that. Otherwise, feel free to slot in any of these setup moves. He will do very solid amounts just by being able to chain Deception Strike and Billy Club Beatdown all the time. For a power character, your focus is on proper use of Last Rites. Now, that last build I gave does make use of that. And ideally, if your teammates are capable of applying the debuffs, then you can combine speed and power in Daredevil. It's what makes him so dangerous in PvP right now. If you don't have a team that reliably applies physical debuffs, then MANRIKI GUSARI is your setup move of choice. This is one of the ways that you will use to go ahead and enter stealth. These last rites, his biggest source of just raw upfront damage, takes advantage of both of these. And both of them together will determine the final damage of last rites. Deception Strike, always a good third one for that extra turn. That does allow him to regenerate his stamina faster. These two chained back and forth will effectively recover 30 stamina for the turn, allowing you to recharge your stamina for last rites much faster. And again, it kind of depends on what buffs or debuffs you need to have on the enemy for you to make the best use of this particular move. That high stamina cost is the only thing that really limits last rites. So you need to have some way to manage this, and because you won't always be in stealth, because half the time you might end up breaking stealth yourself by accident, especially if you run coordinated, exploit weakness needs physical debuffs on the enemy. So a power concept starts with last rites, and then begins to build the other two moves from there. And a speed concept starts with Deception Strike and builds the other two moves from there. Ultimately, again, provided he's with a team that can support him, the two of them can meet and give a very powerful PvP build. That's all about the front-loaded damage, where he starts stealthy with Veiled and has the option of two separate stealthy maneuvers, as well as two that are exploiting weakness as soon as those debuffs are on the enemy. Demoralize the mental debuff. You can't rely on it in order to use it with exploit weakness. He's got to have a teammate that helps him out, or he's got to apply it himself. Final thoughts on Daredevil. He is a PvP machine for a reason right now. It is his innate and his passive working together because of how strong accuracy and evasion are in PvP right now. His ability to stack his accuracy higher and higher and higher through things like that 25% if they go into stealth, or if the enemy wasp throws up protect, it becomes easier for Daredevil to hit everybody else. A lot of people just leave her to last and then whittle her down then. As soon as she throws up protect, Daredevil is going to hurt her team very quickly. And he does get a, and you know what? He's going to get his 15% class bonus against wasp teams. Daredevil is part of the current PvP meta, so I went over that in this video a lot more than I normally do. Let me be clear. This man is a monster in PvE too. He really is. Single target damage, high numbers. His Deception Strike and Billy Club Beatdown can be chained to rapidly work your way through waves of small enemies, while keeping either a debuff, like he can use something like BATON ROUGE to keep a powerful buff on himself, or save all the stamina for last rites when you're fighting an enemy that he doesn't kill in a single turn anyway. I will go ahead and wrap up the video here. I have prepped the post for another infiltrator on request. I'm moving through these videos with some speed, but I'm trying not to neglect the information as I go. Every one of these should be a standalone video that you are not required to watch another one to get the information from it. This marks the point where PvP meta characters begin to enter the rotation. Wasp and Rocket Raccoon will be upcoming. Marvel Now Black Widow does need her time in the limelight, especially now that I've gone over her Age of Ultron variant. But I've got some other characters that I need to get through first. Hulk has been heavily requested. And I'm looking forward to doing his, actually. I am looking forward to doing his. And he's probably not more than a few days away. I'm going to try to get through these as fast as I can, but with something like 30 characters left to go through, there's a lot left for me to do, and not all of them will I have had the practical experience that I've had with Daredevil. The one that I'm doing after this, that'll be up in just hopefully a few hours, is a character who not only do I have no practical experience with, none of my allies have ever put him as a leader, and I only have him at level 20. I could potentially raise him higher than that, but it really depends on me sitting there in the store and clicking canisters just to boost him up to 30. And I don't know. I may do that, because I really only need maybe 10 more infiltrator canisters for him, and I'll have him at 30. That's not a problem. I'm going to... Okay. Let's go ahead and actually finish this now. I rant way too long. Otherwise, this is Daredevil. This is a powerful infiltrator. A lot of you have already started to invest in him. Hopefully this shows those of you who have him and have been thinking about him, that he is a very strong infiltrator, one of the top in the game right now. He is definitely part of the PvP meta. He's very powerful. If you're looking at a PvP meta team, hopefully this clarifies whether or not you want Daredevil in that slot. Until next time, here just in a few hours, hopefully, this is Hoagland. I'm out.